Ever wonder why we sometimes cheer for the very people who let us down? It's a wild paradox, right? We've seen it time and again, people rallying behind leaders who betray their trust, defend systems that take advantage of them, and idolize figures who chip away at the truth. It's almost like a tragic comedy, where the punchline is our own naivety. But dig a little deeper, and it's clear this isn't just about smarts. It reveals some pretty unsettling truths about human psychology. History is replete with examples that seem almost unbelievable in hindsight. Roman citizens celebrated Nero even as Rome burned under his rule. In the 20th century, millions hailed Stalin, Mao, and Hitler as visionaries, while they orchestrated terror and mass suffering. More recently, investors poured billions into Tyrannos, convinced by Elizabeth Holmes' charisma and empty promises. Even today, populist leaders across the globe command devotion despite blatant corruption. Time and again, we're confronted with the same perplexing question. Why do we place our trust in the To unravel this paradox, we must delve beyond politics and into the depths of human nature. Here, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche becomes our unlikely guide. Nietzsche was no gentle teacher. His words cut deep, and his insights are often uncomfortable. But he saw truths about power, morality, and the human soul that remain as urgent today as they were in the 19th century. He dared to ask, what is it within us that makes us long for chains? Why do we seek comfort in illusions instead of strength in freedom? Why do we follow false gods rather than risk the burden of becoming ourselves? Nietzsche believed that beneath all human behavior lies one fundamental force: the will to power. This isn't simply the desire to dominate others. As many assume, it's deeper, more primal. The drive of all living things to expand, to grow, to express their strength, to shape the world around them. A tree stretching toward sunlight, an artist struggling to capture beauty, a scientist uncovering truth, even a child learning to walk. All of these are expressions of the will to power. It's life's essence, the very pulse of vitality itself. But when this will is stifled, repressed, or denied, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes envy, resentment, and the hunger to control. A society that teaches people to suppress their instincts, to distrust their creativity, to obey without question. Such a society breeds not strength, but weakness. And weakness, Nietzsche warned, is fertile ground for tyranny. Because when people lose the courage to express their own power, they seek substitutes. They look for leaders who will embody the strength they lack, who will carry the burden they fear, who will promise salvation from the anxieties of freedom. This is why corrupt leaders rise. They don't ascend simply by their own cunning. They rise because the people invite them. They exploit the cracks in our psychology, our longing for certainty, our fear of responsibility, our resentment of those who surpass us. They thrive because, at some level, we want them to. Nietzsche explained this dynamic through his distinction between two forms of morality: the morality of masters and the morality of slaves. Master morality is born of vitality, confidence, and creativity. It affirms life, honors courage, values excellence, and celebrates achievement. Slave morality, by contrast, is born of weakness and fear. It inverts values. Strength becomes cruelty. Confidence becomes arrogance. Pleasure becomes sin. In this worldview, meekness is virtue, obedience is noble, and resentment of the successful becomes moral righteousness. This slave morality, Nietzsche argued, dominates modern societies. It teaches people to suppress ambition, to envy the strong, to distrust individuality. And it's precisely within this environment that corrupt leaders flourish. They present themselves as defenders of the weak, champions of equality, protectors against imagined enemies. They channel resentment into power. They weaponize envy. They thrive not by lifting people up, but by convincing them that to be small, dependent, and obedient is good. But perhaps the most dangerous truth Nietzsche revealed is that most people don't actually want freedom. They think they do. They chant for it, vote for it, march for it. But freedom is heavy. Freedom demands responsibility, risk, and the courage to face uncertainty. True freedom means no one else is to blame, no one else can decide for you, no one else can carry your fate. And for many, that burden is unbearable. Thus, they escape into the arms of authority. They surrender to leaders who promise safety, clarity, and meaning. They exchange the anxiety of self-determination for the comfort of obedience. Erich Fromm, echoing Nietzsche decades later, called this the escape from freedom. It's not imposed upon us, it's chosen. Chosen by the millions who prefer security over sovereignty, illusion over truth. And so, the tyrant and the submissive crowd form a perfect pair. The one cannot exist without the other. The dictator needs the people's fear, and the people need the dictator's promises. This isn't the tragedy of history. It's the logic of human psychology, playing out over and over in palaces and parliaments, in churches and corporations, in every corner of the human story. This dynamic is reinforced by what Nietzsche called the herd instinct. Human beings are social animals. To belong is our deepest craving, and to be cast out is our greatest fear. The herd offers safety, identity, and meaning. But the herd also punishes deviation, to question too loudly, to stand apart, to refuse conformity. These acts are met not with applause but with suspicion, mockery, and hostility. And so, most people learn to silence their doubts, to accept the slogans, to cheer when others cheer. The herd doesn't ask, "Is it true?" It asks, "Is it shared?" And in that shift from truth to conformity, power finds its opening. A lie repeated by millions becomes stronger than a truth spoken by one. A leader cheered by the crowd appears legitimate, no matter his crimes. The herd sustains him, even against its own interests, because in following him, it follows itself. This is why Nietzsche declared, "God is dead," not because he celebrated atheism, but because he saw that the old sources of truth, morality, and meaning had collapsed. For centuries, religion had given people a framework, commandments to follow, synsto, aboit, divine authority to obey. But as science, philosophy, and modernity dissolved those certainties, people were left adrift. Without God, where would meaning come from? Without commandments, how would we know what is good? Nietzsche feared that in this vacuum, people would not become free creators of value, but would instead rush toward new idols. Political leaders, ideologies, false prophets. When God is dead, the temptation is not liberation, but substitution. We kill the old master only to crown a new one. The cult of personality, the party, the corporation, the celebrity. These become the gods of the modern herd. And once again, the crowd kneel. Here the archetypes emerge. Nietzsche contrasted two figures, the Bermensch and the last man. The Bermensch, often misunderstood as some monstrous tyrant, was for Nietzsche the individual who creates his own values, who embraces life fully, who dares to stand alone. The last man, by contrast, is the product of herd morality. Timid, comfortable, addicted to mediocrity, terrified of risk. The last man says, "We have invented happiness," and blinks. He seeks safety, equality, and convenience, but nothing higher. And because he cannot bear greatness, he resents it, mocks it, destroys it. Corrupt leaders thrive in societies of last men. They promise entertainment instead of excellence, comfort instead of challenge, distraction instead of meaning. They lull the herd into obedience by offering shallow pleasures and easy enemies. And the herd, grateful to be spared the weight of freedom, applauds. Yet Nietzsche was not merely a prophet of despair. He also pointed toward a path of resistance. History, too, is filled with examples of individuals and communities who refused to bow. Nelson Mandela, who endured decades of imprisonment rather than surrender his vision of justice. The people of Iceland, who resisted foreign domination to preserve their culture. The citizens of Liberia, who claimed freedom from slavery and built a nation against impossible odds. These were not perfect stories, but they were signs that the human spirit can rise above the herd. that individuals can shoulder the burden of freedom and reshape the world. The lesson is not that corrupt leaders will disappear. They will always exist, as long as there are crowds eager to believe in them. The lesson is that we must change ourselves. We must cultivate strength, creativity, and courage. We must learn to say no to comforting lies and yes to difficult truths. We must resist the urge to trade our freedom for a false sense of safety. Nietzsche's challenge is crystal clear. Be true to yourself. Don't blend into the crowd. Don't idolize false leaders. And don't shy away from freedom. Embrace it with all its risks and uncertainties. Living fully means living boldly, not recklessly, but with courage, ready to carve out meaning in a world that often feels meaningless. The reason we cheer for corrupt leaders reflects back on us. It's not just about them, it's about our fears, desires, and craving for comfort. If we want to break this cycle, we need to start by looking within. We must face our own fears, our tendency to follow the herd, and our desire for change. The tyrant doesn't fall just from anger. He falls when people no longer rely on him. When we find the strength to shoulder our own freedom, that's when his power crumbles. Nietzsche's message is as relevant today as ever. The future belongs not to the herd or the last man, but to those who dare to live authentically. So, the next time you hear the crowd cheering, ask yourself, are they celebrating greatness or their own shackles? And then consider, what will your cheer be?